When does it make sense to work with a financial advisor versus managing investments myself? How should we evaluate a financial advisor? Two-part question there from Darlene. So the making sense part, I think that we could probably say that depends.
Yes.
And I think on what level do you want to work with a financial advisor?
I think, if you're just getting started and you just need to get some momentum going, that's one thing. You can, basically just start contributing. If you've got an employer plan, start adding to it. But there are some caveats to that, because you and I both have had experiences in the past where we thought we were doing the right thing, and then we found out what we were doing wasn't what we expected.
Yeah, both of us have not been financial advisors for our entire careers. So prior to being one, I think it's important to realize on this side of things that we now know that we didn't know what we didn't know. You didn't even know the questions to ask. I think of a time early in my work career when I first was eligible to contribute to my employer-sponsored plan. I had a 401k at KATV at my former employer. And, you're not given any guidance, right? You're given the manual, the packet, right? Sign up and get this back to me by Friday. That's about all of the information you're going to get. And so I was on my own. I enrolled. I knew it was important to save. I knew it was important to invest, but I didn't have any idea what I was investing in. You're left on your own to choose those investments if you're not working with a financial advisor. And I chose to, as I looked at that list of 10 to 12 investment options, I saw high yield fund. And I thought to myself, well, I want a high yield.
Everybody wants a high yield.
That sounds good. And you can look at the history on it, because back when interest rates were good, they probably did pretty good, right? And I had no idea what I was investing in, but I was investing in a fixed income fund, a bond fund, high yield bonds, which are typically corporate bonds. And at 20-something years old, Teresa, that was probably not the investment objective I needed to seek.
It was most definitely not the investment objective you needed to be seeking. And for me, I didn't know that you could use an IRA, regardless of whether you were eligible for an employer plan. Because my previous career, I was a bookkeeper, and we didn't have employer plans typically. You're usually going to be 1099 or just a basic W-2 employee. And so for me, I could have gotten a much earlier start on my retirement if I had known that I had access to those, but it just was not part of my education growing up.
Yeah, so that's the point here is you could benefit from working with a financial advisor even at an early age, but the time spent with a financial advisor, the level of the depth, I guess we should say, of the relationship might not be that much, because you're really just going to need some general guidance.
Yes, I think early in your investing career, you really just need a little bit of education, well, a whole lot of education, a little bit of coaching, get you started, and then there's a little bit of a set it and forget it period of time where you're just adding, contributing, executing the things you've discussed, where you don't necessarily need to meet regularly.
Yeah.
But then that dynamic shifts drastically as you approach retirement.
Yeah, when you begin building wealth and you start to think about how am I going to get this wealth to last me through retirement, we'll call that the pre-retirement years, and we would define that as 5 to 10 years away from potentially retiring. You may not know exactly when you're going to plan to retire, but when you're getting into those pre-retirement years, the game changes in all kinds of ways. You're dealing with all sorts of complexities that you didn't deal with earlier in life, because earlier you're just trying to accumulate, right? You're trying to get it in the right type of investments, continue to contribute, and build wealth. And then once you have it, what are you building the wealth for? Well, in most cases, you're building it to retire and to live on in your post-work years. And we see it time and time again, Teresa. Most people come in here in that time span of life because they don't have any idea what that number on their statement really means.
Yes, they can have a figure that they've accumulated, but they don't know how to turn that into an income stream. And because the dynamics shift so drastically when you go from accumulating funds to trying to use those for income, it is so critical that you create a clear plan to get you into and through retirement.
Yeah, so the retirement income stage, you really need the planning process there. We call it the retirement red zone. The game changes when you get into that 5 to 10 year time frame away from retirement. We use the red zone analogy because of football, right? You think about the football game, the red zone is what? It's inside the 20-yard line. And if you ask any offensive coordinator in football, they will tell you that they call plays differently inside the 20 than they do between the 20s, because you don't have as much field to work with. Fewer less room for error. And that's what we're talking about here in the pre-retirement years, Darlene, if that's you. And she doesn't tell us how old she is, but if you're in 5 to 10 years out from potentially retiring and you need to know how you can make your assets turn into income and last for a lifetime, that's a vital time. Now, we will put some caveats in there as far as we're not saying don't do it before then, but I think it is important to identify, Teresa, some major life changes could definitely warrant reaching out and beginning to work with a financial advisor.
And even beyond that, before we get into that, if you are one of those people that you're like, I don't know when I want to retire, then your 50s. When you reach your 50s, it's time to really start refining what your retirement's going to look like for you. But what are some other triggers? If you just recently got an inheritance or you have one coming very soon, that is something that you're likely going to want to caretake very carefully. So that's a good reason to reach out to an advisor. If you're going through the process of either marriage or divorce, adding kids to the family, there are different steps financially that you can take to create a good habit going forward in those moments as well.
Yeah, basically, you need to reach out and get help making major financial decisions. And those financial decisions can be triggered by some of the things that we talked about there. But I think it's interesting the way you look at Darlene's question too, Teresa. She's asking if it makes sense to work with a financial advisor versus managing investments. So that's the dynamic she's putting those two up against. And we really didn't talk too much about the managing investments part here. There are all kinds of reasons and times that it makes sense to work with a financial advisor that don't revolve around investments.
And I think that's a misnomer out there about what we do. I think a lot of people, when they're coming to meet with a financial advisor, they're purely expecting investments. What they don't realize is a good financial advisor is looking at the bigger picture and protecting your wealth overall. There are a lot of things that we guide our clients to that we make zero money off of, but it's what's in their best interest to make sure they're protected. You know, our mission statement says we help people to discover it and protect their financial independence. It's both, they work together, because I can create the best plan in the whole wide world, but if I'm not protecting you as well, something's going to come in and blow it up.
Yeah. So the second part of the question, how should we evaluate a financial advisor? So these are the interview questions you need to take with you, right? You can Google that and you can see that online. Some of those are really good questions. Some, I think they need a little bit of perspective on when you look at that. But yeah, you need to bring any question you want to ask, first of all, right? I think that's the first part, evaluating a financial advisor. Think about what you're trying to get out of the relationship. What do you want out of that relationship? But just general things. Are they educating and coaching you? We believe the heart of a teacher is vital to this, and that's why we do this show. I mean, you talk about not making any money off of some of the things services we provide our clients. We pay to put this show on the radio, right? So we're doing this as an outreach to you. We want to give people some free information that they can use to better their financial lives, and that continues when we go into a client meeting room as well. And I think that'd be the first thing that I would say. If you walk into a meeting room at a financial services firm and they just jump right into what they're going to do for you, and it starts to feel a little salesy, I think that's the time that you realize you're probably not in the right spot.
I think if I walked into my doctor's office and he immediately started trying to sell me medications before he's taken time to diagnose me, that would be a huge red flag. But there are a lot of people that when they walk into a financial advisor's office, they're asked, how much do you have? Let me tell you what I can do for you. And to me, that is putting the cart before the horse. And another thing that I hear from a lot of people that you could kind of take from us is, are they speaking a language you understand? Every industry has their own jargon. Ours is no differentiator in that particular space.
Right.
But we work very hard to communicate in a way that our clients feel empowered, not like we've been trying to just show how smart we are.
Yeah, I think looking for a place that plans is vital there. We are planners first. I say that all the time to my clients. We don't talk about investments in the first appointment unless someone just asks a question about a type of investment. We're certainly an open book, but the point is we want to let the plan lead. The plan needs to determine what the investment strategy is. And we talked a little bit about that. You don't need a high yield fund in your 20s, right? We don't have a one size fits all approach. And that kind of brings up another part of that. You should be asking an advisor you're potentially going to work with what type of licenses they have.
Yes, because I think of it like a toolkit. If I were to walk up to or to hire a handyman and all he's got's a hammer, then I better need something nailed because it's the only tool he has. Our licensing determines what tools we can apply to the planning process to be able to get you where you need to go. So if they're not fully licensed, it's going to create some boundaries, and it may also be who they work with. There are some broker dealers out there that have very limited products. So even if they have the full licensing, do they have access to the products that are going to get you where you need to go once you've created your plan?
So you want to work with somebody that has the full toolbox behind them, right?
Yes.
You can pull out the wrench for the right job or the hammer for the right job. You don't want to have to fit the wrong tool to the wrong job. And then the other part of that, and you could also have said this first, is the fiduciary aspect of it. We're fiduciaries at Gen Wealth Financial Advisors, and that's a word that gets kicked around. So, you know,
It's the new buzzword.
High dollar word, but what does it really mean? And it really means we are pledging to act in the client's best interest.
And the key there is we have a legal obligation to act in our client's best interest. And what's interesting, if you study that word, it's not like there's a specific designation we go through to do that. It's how we choose to behave. So just because someone says they're a fiduciary does not mean that they're behaving as a fiduciary. So be careful of just seeing that word and assuming that's what you're getting. Another thing we've seen a lot in our industry is this race to the bottom when it comes to fees.
Yeah.
You know, you see all this when people are talking about what to interview your advisor about, they're saying, well, what are the fees? What are the fees? And fees are not necessarily a bad thing. I did not come to work today on a bike, which would be the most cost-effective way for me to travel, because there is value in the vehicle that I have chosen. So we don't see fees as necessarily a bad thing as long as you're getting the value that you need out of the product that you're using or the advisor that you're using.
And don't just compare the fee to the other person's fee. We would certainly encourage you to interview multiple advisors. I do think you can probably interview too many. I have.
You can get analysis paralysis if you're not careful.
I've had some people come in and they said, you're one of 5, 6. Like, I think, you know, you're not going to remember. By the time you get to the 5th or 6th one, you're not even going to remember what the first guy said.
Hopefully
right?
we were in the last half of that, if that's the case.
Exactly. So I think 3 is understandable. 2 or 3, you know, you don't always have to do that if you feel comfortable with the first one. But I wouldn't, if you did interview 3, I would not compare the fees, and that be my only comparison, because I would determine, what am I really getting based on that interview with the financial advisor for that? Because if it's just investment management, well, you would expect the fee to be lower there than it would be where you're going to get everything, where you're going to get holistic planning. So I think it needs to be an apples to apples comparison always when it comes to fees too.
And understand that some advisors will say that you're paying for planning, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
What is planning to them? Because I had someone come in just the other day, they were being expected to pay a certain amount per year for planning, had not received a single planning document in the last year.
Okay.
So what was the planning?
Right. So I hope that helped, Darlene. I hope it maybe spurs you to at least explore the opportunity to work with a financial advisor, and we thank you for the question.